I'm Paul Van Squike of Taekwondo Guide, and this is Topic Tuesday, where I address your comments and topics all about Taekwondo. Now, if you want in on the action, just leave a comment in the comment section below, and I can address it on next week's Topic Tuesday. Let's jump right into your topics with our first topic from Ora Kulu, who writes, Master, how do I improve my resistance during sparring? I always start very energetic and lose energy fast. I assume Orakulu means endurance during sparring. There's two ways to approach this. One is to build more stamina for said activity. In the case of sparring, this can be accomplished by sparring more frequently, or by doing rounds on the heavy bag. Anything that gets your body accustomed to these types of movements and makes your body more adapted to said activity. Okay, number two is to be more efficient in your use of techniques and your body's energy. That's, to me, the most important one. And that's actually going to be a big part of building endurance in general, is that as you become more and more accustomed to throwing kicks, to moving around in the context of sparring, your body will become more efficient at doing that and waste less energy. You can take someone like a runner who in theory has great cardiovascular health and put them into sparring when they don't have a whole lot of training. They'll get pretty much just as tired as someone who has little running experience. It's not about this broad concept we call your cardiovascular tank, or whatever you want to think of it as. It's about adapting to the specific activity. Now, when it comes to sparring, look at how you're moving. Are you tight when you don't need to be? Are you throwing kicks at the wrong time? When you throw kicks, is every single kick, even a kick that's meant to just kind of probe to sense what's going on, is it thrown with the utmost energy behind it? If so, you're wasting energy you don't need to waste. Efficiency is going to be your best friend. Don't waste your energy. Relax, breathe, and try to play the game of timing your techniques perfectly. That will give you a lot more energy than slamming the cardio training. And if you're slamming the cardio training, you got to do it inside the context of sparring. Again, rounds on a heavy bag, or just increasing your sparring load in general. All right, next question from Hayden Sheenberg. Hayden Sheenberg. Hello. I know it is the day before next Topic Tuesday, so I totally understand if this one doesn't make it. Well, it made it this week. I'm 17 and a third-degree black belt plus instructor at my local Taekwondo school, and I've been doing Taekwondo/martial arts for a long portion of my life. Just as an aside, if you started very young, don't let any of the weird baby boomer, combat-obsessed, smelly, overweight guys in the comments section make you feel bad about your third-degree black belt. That is a cool accomplishment, something you should feel proud of, that you got that by 17. Don't make them feel bad. Don't let them make you feel bad about that. Okay, when I was younger, I'd always see those at my Taekwondo school do self-defense and demo classes. I'm still very interested and curious about both of these things and would love to do them. The issue is, our school doesn't do either of these classes anymore, and I feel obliged to stay due to my instructor role. How could I still learn some of these things while continuing to be an instructor at my Taekwondo school? Is it even worth pursuing? I know these are difficult and somewhat specific questions, so I really appreciate just hearing your thoughts. Thank you so much for your work. I really have been enjoying your videos. Those are good questions. Let's talk about demonstration classes. I have a problem as an instructor in that I know way more stuff than I can reasonably get to my students. What I need to do is put my attention where the most value is generated. And unfortunately, that leaves no room for a lot of things I'd love to have. I'd like to have a demonstration class too. I'd like to have a family class. I'd like to have a Pumse competition class. I'd like to have a class that works specifically on the traditional interpretation of Taekwondo movements from Okinawan karate. I'd love all those things. I don't have very many of those at all, simply because my time is spent doing the other classes. And there's a limited amount of classes you can teach in a week without going insane. You can only do it sustainably so long. So if you're already teaching 20 classes, adding another one and another one and another one on top is going to burn out the instructor. So I'd love to have these things at my school. I also have a sparring program at my school that I don't teach. It exists because I found someone who is very capable of teaching it, probably better than I could ever teach it, and loves to teach it. So it's a great fusion situation we have going on. There's been things in the past that I wanted to see at the Taekwondo school that I came up through. So what I did is, instead of wanting the instructors to take it upon themselves and teach it, I ran the class myself. That is what I'm proposing that you do. Now, you can make it like a club type environment, so you're not saying I'm an expert in these things. You're saying, these are things that intrigue me, let's practice together. And there's a lot of content out there that you can attach to and try to emulate. This is the golden age of information. We've never had anything like it before. If you see a demonstration you like on the internet, you can start practicing the movements of that demonstration. You can start watching videos on the kicking techniques and trying to practice them with a group of people. And let me also mention that if your goal is to go out and learn something new that you're not learning at your current Taekwondo school, I don't think you're being disloyal by going out and learning those things. It's something that they don't teach. I don't teach anything about ground fighting. If I have a student who wants to learn ground fighting, I would tell them, we'll go somewhere else and learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or go somewhere and learn judo or wrestling, or something that incorporates that element that we don't spend a lot of time, if any time, on. So I wouldn't feel bad about that. And you could go study something that has nothing to do with martial arts in and of itself and apply that to demonstrations such as gymnastics, or, believe it or not, dancing, because learning choreography and all of that kind of stuff does play into learning to do demonstrations. It's a theatrical type of activity. So learning how to be theatrical could contribute to that, and that's not going to look like it's anything martial arts related on the surface, right? But even if you don't want to do those things, there's plenty of information out there for you to start sinking your teeth into and making it happen. That's true of the self-defense stuff as well. I think I covered everything in that question. Make it happen yourself. Again, I want to emphasize that instructors often just don't have the time, or have put all their energy they can into other places. So if you want something to exist at the school, it doesn't exist yet, make it happen yourself. Or, you can always start your own school down the road and do these things that your school doesn't do. I've always believed it's good not to compete with the instructors you came up under. I don't find that to be an honorable thing to do, so I would try to do it with their blessing and do it far enough away from them where you're not taking their students, and certainly don't try to poach their students, but eventually you can develop things that they're not developing in you, and maybe make that a unique selling point of yours. All right, let's move on to the next question from James Connor 7417, who says, after living in Japan during most of my 20s and studying Taekwondo under a Korean national, I always shudder whenever I saw Cobra Kai and Karate Kid when they bow whilst looking each other in the eye. I was always taught that looking down and not making eye contact is the respectful way to bow. But quite funny, because even Mr. Miyagi in the first Karate Kid movie tells Daniel to maintain eye contact. Even Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon. I guess it's a kind of Hollywood spin on do not turn your back on the potential enemy. Don't trust anyone. Am I missing the memo on bowing in martial arts? How are you teaching it in your dojo? All this said, I love Cobra Kai, just my knee-jerk reaction. Yeah, that's funny, right? I have never once in all of my studies of martial arts encountered a place where you're to look your opponent in the eye while bowing. Now, of course, we've had people come in and do that because, just like he's saying, it happens in movies all the time. Well, my instructor, I watched a child do this in front of my instructor, and this is what my instructor said. If you don't trust your opponent, don't bow to them. A bow, of course, is supposed to be a sign of respect. Why would you bow respectfully to someone you have no trust for? We bow in class, we bow in competition, okay? And those are places where we're supposed to have trust for our opponents. And of course, if we're competing and we bow and the person hits us, well, they lose, they're disqualified, right? So it's not going to happen unless they're off their meds crazy, right? So I wouldn't even worry about any kind of practicality behind it. Yeah, you bow to people you want to respect as a sign, a symbol of that respect. The idea of looking as you bow, I have no idea where that came from. I have no idea. Never once have I encountered it in any place teaching martial arts. So I don't know. Good question. Where did it come from? Next from LY3773. I really love Topic Tuesday, so here is my contribution in form of a question. How can I help a child, in my case 13 years old, to improve their Kihap if it is afraid or embarrassed to scream in front of the class? Yeah, if you don't know what Kihap is, it means, if you break the words down, ki, energy, hop is to gather or unify, so you could say to gather energy or unify energy, and of course we express that with a shouting sound. Yes, it's very difficult to get some children to do this, particularly teenagers. All you can do, in my experience, is explain the reasons. So, what are the reasons for the Kihap? Number one, it teaches some form of breath control. When you exhale on the performance of a technique, it can, in theory, increase the power of the technique. The sound can frighten or startle someone. The act of doing it, especially in the setting of a group, can be energetic in general, puts out the vibe of a high energy environment. So there's very practical reasons behind it, at least in theory, that you could explain to them. Sometimes that helps. The other thing that can help is giving an actual tangible exercise. And one thing I used to do is I had a metal dustpan that you could get it to make a little bit of a vibrating sound. So if you Kihap correctly, it puts enough force out that you can make certain things resonate a little bit. And so that actually gave them feedback as to how loud they were being. But I've noticed since I began teaching, it would have been in tail end of 2006 or so, somewhere in there, that it's harder and harder to get Kihaps out of people. It might just be the way the culture is shifting. So my approach to it is not to beat someone over the head constantly and not let anything progress if the Kihap isn't happening. I explain the reasoning, I try to encourage it, but I don't expect a miracle overnight. Sometimes people just need time, particularly teenagers. So I would encourage you not to get too hung up on any one thing when it comes to any particular student. They're going to have areas where they excel, and they're going to have areas that are difficult for them. And so if you grind at that one thing, and maybe it's something that's not even super important to the overall development of the student, that can be discouraging, and it burns you out as an instructor, I can tell you that. So take it incrementally and don't worry about transforming the entirety of the student overnight, if that's the case, this situation. Oh, that's a tough one. All the best to you on that. All right. Next one comes from Jang Ho Lee, who says, "Excuse me, sir, I come from a more combative martial art, and I just started taking Taekwondo and started training there for about a year. I feel I struggle in sparring. I have a hard time with using my hands. How can I use my front punch to get it to work more efficiently? For some reason in Taekwondo I've been struggling." In the context of Olympic sparring, the punch has a few really valuable uses. Okay, the first one is to disrupt someone mid-kick. So of course the chamber of the kick leaves you vulnerable for a split second. At the point where you're up on one leg, you have less balance, less stability. If you can time your punch so that you hit the person in that moment, it can be quite disruptive. It can also be more likely to stun them, because often someone is breathing in preparation of the technique, and then they exhale on the execution. The other place where a punch can be quite useful is anytime you complete your kick and you're moving into close range, into like a clinching type of position, you might as well just move in with a punch. Even if it fails, it doesn't cost you a lot in energy, and it's one more thing they have to worry about. And remember, even if judges aren't scoring punches, if you're really delivering a hard blow, that adds up psychologically and physically, and it can help you in the match overall. So yeah, I wouldn't discount using the punches, and I think the two places to look at them are disrupting people mid-kick and entering after your kick. Those two big places. All right. From Cindy Pearson, 6324, "Can you expand on self-defense techniques you would most likely need to use? Also, what would be practical ones to teach 60-plus-year-old group?" Self-defense is so hard because it's all theoretical. We don't know the specific situation someone would encounter. So if we talk about sparring, we know exactly what the person is going to encounter. We know exactly the environment they'll be in, and we can train them to fit those things. So I can train someone to spar because I know what sparring is. Self-defense can present itself in so many different ways. So it's very difficult to train for that. Likewise, the surprise element of it makes it so difficult, because often you just won't have access to the physical tools you've been working on. The potential self-defense situation will erupt and conclude before you even know what happened. Okay, all that being said, and understanding that this is just theoretical, we all instructors say, this is my version of self-defense, and who really knows if any of it will work or not. My personal belief is the most valuable stuff you can teach when it comes to self-defense is avoidance tactics. So you want to hammer over and over again that you don't want to engage with someone. So your awareness is the first barrier, just keeping clear physical boundaries, space, obstacles, all of that stuff, so that people aren't close enough to do stuff to you. Okay, if they enter that range where now they're a physical threat, how can you keep them back out of that range? I don't encourage fighting right out of the gate because that keeps you in their range. If you can keep yourself away long enough, you can maybe get to safety, someone can intervene, you can frustrate their attempts, or you can get to a weapons platform, which is going to be superior to your hands and feet if you have trained at all in a weapons platform. So the stuff that I primarily focus on, that I label self-defense, is about how to stay away from people. Step one is to maintain the space where they always have to step to get close enough to grab or strike you. And step two is if they do grab or strike at you, how can you deflect it? If the grip is secured, how can you break free of it so you can get back to that space? I don't know how much age is a factor in these things. If we're talking about fighting, older people will be at a disadvantage. If we're talking about avoidance, older people will be at a disadvantage. There's no place where older people have an advantage physically. So I don't know that I would recommend one form over another. Because none of them are going to have a particular advantage for a young person that they don't also share with an older person, or vice versa. It's tough. That's why I really don't label a lot of what I do self-defense. I let the student decide what is self-defense. We do kicking, punching, blocking, all these sorts of things. There are, without a doubt, components of that can cross over into self-defense. And the whole practice of a martial art, I do believe it firmly transforms a person in a way that makes them more formidable in any sort of self-defense situation. But as to what exactly to do to make that better, that's really hard to say. And frankly, I think a lot of the places that devote themselves exclusively to self-defense don't even necessarily do a good job with this sort of stuff. But from a technique standpoint, avoidance, basic break holds, all of that kind of stuff, to me seems like the best route. All right, next question from Dino Scholar. Love your vids. I am currently learning karate now, but I want to ask if it's possible to learn taekwondo at home. If you're already learning karate, it's going to be very similar to taekwondo. And so if you want to just plug in a few techniques from taekwondo that you don't do in karate classes, work on them on a heavy bag, work on them with a friend with some pad drills, play with them in your sparring. It should be able to not be too big of a deal for you. I have incorporated techniques from different karate styles into my taekwondo just by watching videos on the internet. When you have that foundation already, when you're live training with people, you can do that kind of thing. If you don't have a foundation, when you're not live training with people, it's really hard to build any kind of reliability with a technique because you don't have the opportunity to build the reflexes associated with it. One example I remember, Kyokushin Karate, they were flipping their kicks over before Taekwondo ever really started doing it. And I would watch a lot of Kyokushin Karate knockout compilations. And so before it was ever a thing in Taekwondo, I was doing flip kicks where you roundhouse kick and then flip it over. Some people call it a question mark kick, I think, something like that. And I used it in sparring all the time in classes, just really found it useful. And now, of course, it's a staple of Taekwondo sparring. But I borrowed it from karate before we had it as an official thing. So add what you like if you see it. Play with it. From Steve Karp, 3325. Hello, Master Paul. Please keep us updated on your hip healing journey. I'm 55, a blue belt, and I'm struggling with hip joint arthritis. I'm sorry, I know how awful that is. Following that thought, my question to you is, can certain physical limitations limit one's official progress in Taekwondo? I really want to progress through the belt system, but more importantly, I want to get better at martial arts. But I fear that worsening flexibility might limit me in terms of standards set forth by official sanctioning governing bodies of Taekwondo. Let's start with that question. I can't speak to what the Kukyuan is looking for in this day and age. They've recently changed some of their things. My understanding is now you can't get a 6th-degree black belt, for example, without submitting video documentation of yourself performing the various pumse of Taekwondo. I don't know what standard they hold you to, and I don't know if they take injuries into account when they look at those things. But I can tell you that most Taekwondo schools are happy to progress people who have injuries, who are older. Look, everyone's going to age out of high kicks. Everyone's going to age out of moving quickly. It will happen eventually. Either that or you die before it happens. But if you live a long life, eventually you're going to get slow and kick low. Does that mean you should never do Taekwondo or be promoted in it again? That's not been how it's been viewed in the past. In the past, people at that level were given ranks more as an honor of their time in Taekwondo, their commitment to it, their contribution to the art, and the fact that they're still frickin' doing it when everything hurts. It's an amazing thing. And of course, it's better to keep yourself moving, to stay active than to stop. So we should certainly, as a Taekwondo community, encourage doing it as long as you safely can. So I would say that's going to depend largely on the school and what they expect of you. But the one I came from was always accommodating to people with injuries and people in older age groups. My second question is on a much lighter note. Taekwondo sparring in the Olympics has been incredible to watch. What kinds of things should viewers be taking away or learning from these amazing athletes, and are techniques on display that can work in a regular Taekwondo class or in practical self-defense applications? Thank you as always for your hard work and candor. We wish you the best recovery outcome. Thank you. I have not watched any of the Olympic matches yet. I'm sure I'll see some eventually here, but I can tell you watching any high-level athletes perform in Taekwondo is valuable. Why? Well, simple statement, monkey see, monkey do. There's something about seeing what the human body is capable of at the highest levels that trickles into your own performance. I've observed this many times. You take an athlete, be it pumse or sparring, and you put them around other top-level athletes. Maybe they're not great. You put them around other people who are. It trickles into them. There's something about that. The brain is good at receiving the signal and mimicking the successful things that others around them are doing. And it's fascinating, right? You can see it if you just rewind many years back. All of the sports, everybody's better now. Top-tier athletes from the origin of the many sports out there, from the period where they originated, they would not hold a candle to average athletes nowadays. That's in most cases, at least. And I think that's in large part simply to expectation, the mindset that people have from watching what's possible, which is fascinating, isn't it? Monkey see, monkey do. So yeah, I always encourage my students to watch high-level athletes in Taekwondo, be it pumse or sparring. Check them out, because that quality will start to trickle into your movements, even if you never catch it like they do. Okay. Can the techniques work in regular Taekwondo class? Of course. Of course. Anything that you see work in a sparring match has the potential to work in class or in a match. Can they work in a practical self-defense situation or for practical self-defense applications. Look, if it comes to you needing to hurt someone, you can hurt them with just about any type of kick that hurts people in Taekwondo. If it hurts people in Taekwondo sparring, it can hurt people outside of Taekwondo sparring. What I always mention, though, is you want to weigh it, risk, reward. Spinning hook kick really hurts, okay? Hammer fist really hurts too. You could argue that they put out similar power. Of course, that depends on the individual. But let's just for sake of argument say you can do a horizontal hammer fist or a spinning hook kick with the same amount of power. Someone is attacking you. You have a lot at stake here. If you fail, you may lose your life in this hypothetical situation. Should you A, perform the technique that takes more time and puts you up on one leg so you're less stable and has a bigger risk of failure, or the simple thing, the reward is the same, the risk is higher? I always would encourage people to choose the technique with the lowest amount of risk and the highest amount of reward. Now, that being said, again, maybe you don't have the reflexes of throwing a hammer fist. Maybe you're really good at hitting people with spin hook kicks. I've talked about this before. Hey, if that's what works, if that's what gets you out of the situation, I'm not going to tell you don't do it. I'm not going to say it's impossible to work. Again, to me, self-defense is about staying away from dangerous people. And if you really think you need to engage, you should be learning how to use superior weapon platforms, because honestly, I'd much rather hit someone with a baton than I would throw any kind of kick at them in a self-defense situation. I'm more confident in my ability to hurt them with a weapon than I am with my hands or feet. Sure, if I'm unarmed and thugs materialize out of the sewers, as we've talked about before, and they corner me and I just can't get away, then I will rely on my kicks and punches to the best of my ability. And again, if they can hurt people in Taekwondo sparring, they can hurt people outside of Taekwondo sparring. But risk-reward management is important in any decision-making process. Okay. A lot of good questions this week. Thank you so much, guys. You know the drill. To participate in next week's Topic Tuesday, just leave a comment. We're at 33 minutes, which is great, so I am going to stop this right now. Enjoy your training.